Alrighty, good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's having a wonderful start to the pre-Christmas week. We've got a rather spectacular guest that I've had the honor to speak with. Gosh, it's coming up on 2 years since we've actually had a at-length conversation, but was lucky enough to get in touch with this SOG warrior through Mr. Gene Pugh, one of our prior guests, and very proud to know both of these men, stellar soldiers. Mr. Travis Mills, our guest today, was a lieutenant, ended up becoming a captain while with SOG, and he'll, of course, update us more into his ranks as he went through and some of the stuff he did while with the Hatchet Forces, running Recon with RT Python and RT Coral, and then also helped setting up B-53, which we know as the 1-0 school. So I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Travis, and he's going to give a little backstory, a little bio on himself, and we're just going to jump straight in. So, Mr. Travis, thanks for joining us, and the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me this morning. Glad to pass along any information that I may have. Basically, this was in the mid-60s, and the Vietnam War hadn't spun up quite yet. I'd been married about 3 years, and I was pretty high on the draft list at that point in time, but they were taking single men before they were taking married people. But I was like 1A, rather than I was like A2 on the list. They took single men first, then they took married men without children, were on the second level. And because I was about 24 years old at that point in time, I was pretty high on the list. Matter of fact, in the county I lived in, I was number one on the list at the second level when they started taking enlisted men or taking married men. So I'd had a cousin that had been in the Air Force up and around the Washington, D.C. area, and they had worked pretty closely with some of the Special Forces units out of Fort Bragg. And he had been telling me about this unit that was in the Army, and that they were, pretty specialized people, and so I made up my mind that when it came my turn, I was going to enlist rather than just get drafted. I had a brother-in-law that got drafted, and it's whatever they say goes, and that's it, and you don't have a clue. So anyway, I had a very good friend I grew up with and went to high school with, and his father was on the county draft board, and so we all went to the same little country church, and so each month he would tell me, well, we got plenty of single guys this month, you're in good shape. But then it finally came the time, he said, we're out of single guys, you're number one on the list next month. So I went down and enlisted. And so I did my enlistment. This was in June of 1966. And so I went in, and I went in with a good friend of mine that was also in my high school class. He and I joined on the same day, and we went in on what the Army then called a buddy plan, that you two could go in and you'd kind of stay together during your Army career. And so we joined up on the buddy plan. Well, we went to basic training at Fort Polk. After Fort Polk, I went to South Carolina, the infantry school. He went to El Paso to go to Air Defense Artillery School, and we never saw each other again during our entire career. So much for the Army buddy plan. But anyway, like I say, I went through basic training, went up to Charleston, South Carolina, and went through the Infantry AIT training and all of that. And after that, I got assigned. I just happened to be a good public speaker. And so I made very good scores when we were doing our instruction training and that type of thing. So I got kept there at Fort Jackson to be part of the basic training command as being an instructor. And
Wow.
so I was there. And also, when I entered the Army, I was very fortunate. I guessed right a lot of times, so I made a very good score on some of my entrance exams. And so I was qualified for OCS and other type things where you had to have a pretty high score to be able to get in. And at that point in time, in late 66 and early 67, we were losing a lot of lieutenants every week in Vietnam. So the big push was to get some infantry lieutenants. And so, and that was a big thing. My company commander called me in every payday and trying to encourage me to sign up for OCS. Well, I wasn't real sure that's what I wanted to do. I wasn't really looking at making the Army a career. I was just going to do my 3 years and go back home. But I was home on leave, and I spoke to my dad, who was in the Navy in World War II. He was in the South Pacific in World War II, and I told him that they were trying to get me to go to OCS, and he says, "Well, son, I'll tell you this. I don't know how it works in the Army, but in the Navy, officers live a whole lot better than the other guys do." And he said, "My recommendation is if you got a shot, take it." So I went back, and that payday, I made my company commander a very happy man. I volunteered and signed up to go to OCS. It only took them 48 hours. I was on a bus to Fort Bragg, Georgia, to the Army Infantry School. And so there I went through uh, the infantry OCS. In our, we were just turning senior candidates, and we were coming back from the company live fire, company in the attack live fire exercise, which was way out on the extreme edge of Fort Benning. And on the way back, we had a terrible truck wreck. We were all in the convoy. I was in one of the trucks in the back, and we had to go. There had been a big flood and washed the bridge out, and they had an ALVB, one of those temporary bridges, put across there, and it was very tight for a deuce and a half to get across that bridge. So we were coming down those old red dirt roads, and we were about the fourth or fifth truck in the convoy, and our driver got behind quite a bit. So he was driving pretty fast trying to get caught up. Well, the truck in front of him had slowed down to be able to get up.
Oh, hang on. He's been having trouble with the connections.
Am I back?
Yep, you're back now.
I bumped my hand against the thing. Uh, so when he come busting out of the dust, he was about 30 feet behind that truck running 60 miles an hour. So needless to say, he never even hit the brakes. I mean, he just hit that other truck. That truck, he hit it at an angle. It went off the left side of the bridge, and it was about a 15 to 20 foot drop down into the bottom of the creek. That truck went over one side. Our truck bounced off of him, hit the bridge abutment, which was a big concrete pillar anchoring it down. Truck stood right up on its nose and then fell over upside down into the creek. Our platoon had 41 men in it. When they got everybody back to the company that night, there were 7 people left in our platoon. All the rest of us were in the hospital. I wound up with a broken pelvis. Fortunately, no one got killed. We got a lot of people hurt really bad. I think there were 7 medical discharges came out of that wreck. But I spent, well, I was in the hospital, and of course, all of the big wigs came by to visit us, and they told us, "You get out of the hospital by graduation day, and you'll graduate with your company." And so we worked really hard, that type thing, and I begged, pleaded, everything else with my doctor to finally let me out. And so, uh, 31 days, or no, I'm sorry. Uh, I think it was 18 days after the wreck, I got out of the hospital. My company, my platoon leader and the company commander promised that, when this company moves, going to training and stuff, he doesn't have to march. We'll put him in a jeep. We'll take him where he needs to go. We just need to let him stay here. Mainly because soldiering had been very easy for me. It made sense, and I had what I think were some natural leadership abilities just from just from wanting to be in charge of things and get people to do what I wanted them to do. And so I had a chance at one of the honor positions in the company. And as it turned out, again, I was very, very fortunate. And I got selected, or I was awarded Distinguished Honor Graduate of the company. I graduated number one in my company. And, and so by doing that, when we filled out our dream sheets about where our assignments wanted to be, I signed up and wanted to go, of course, into Special Forces. Had I not done that, uh, I had been selected to go to the instructor cadre at the U.S. Army Infantry School. That would have been because I was a good instructor, and but that overrode it, and I got to go to Fort Bragg, and from there I went into Delta Company of the 7th. I went through the Special Forces officer course there. I was both an executive officer and an A-team leader. I spent a year. What was happening in Vietnam at the time was, of course, General Westmoreland held the right that anybody coming into the country, if he had a serious shortage of officers in one particular unit or anything else, it didn't make any difference what your order said. He could put you where he wanted you. And so, what Special Forces did at that point in time is they would hold all of their lieutenants there at Fort Bragg until they made first lieutenant, because there was a lot less demand for first lieutenants than there were second lieutenants. And plus, at the same time, we went through and got a top secret crypto security clearance, which again made it difficult. And the fifth group commander was good in his pleas to General Westmoreland. He says, "Look, these lieutenants come in here, they're directly assigned to me. One, they got a top secret clearance. We have to have that. And these guys are first lieutenants. You don't need first lieutenants that much. And that's what we have as Team XOs is first lieutenants. So we need to keep our lieutenants." When we got there, the 4th Division had just got the dog kicked out of them, and they were bad. And every lieutenant, there were 11 of us that had all been through the SFOC course together and had wound up on the same plane going to Vietnam. And when we landed at Benoit Air Base and went over to Long Binh, every lieutenant on that plane went to the 4th Infantry Division except the 11 of us. And 5th Group put us on a plane at 4:30 that afternoon before they had time to reconsider, and we were in Nha Trang that very first night. So, so anyway, we got to Nha Trang, and again, basically the same thing. We went in and went in to see the adjutant, And he says, okay, guys, we have a big need for lieutenants, so we're going to, you guys go over to the mess hall and get you something to eat, come back, and I will let you know what you're going to be able to do. Well, we did. We came back, and he said, well, guys, guess what? At the time, it was called CNC, Command and Control North. And the one thing that kind of sealed it was we all had top secret crypto clearances, and that was a requirement. So we all went to CNC. Four of us went to FOB4. A couple of, I think, three went to Pontoon, went to FOB2. We still had an FOB in Caisson at the time, and a couple went to Caisson, and three of us went to FOB4 just south of Da Nang. So, and I was one of the ones that went to FOB4. So that's how I wound up at FOB4, and I was assigned to the Hatchet Force, the second company of the Hatchet Force, and stayed on the Hatchet Force there for about three and a half months, something like that. Went on a few operations, and then every American in second company except me was on a team from Okinawa on TDY assignment. And so when their 6 months came up, their 180 days hit, they went back to Okinawa, and I was the only American left there in second company. So, and they did a whole reorganization. So I got assigned to Recon Company. That's how I wound up in Recon Company, and I went in as the executive officer of Team RT Python. And so that's how I wound up over on RT Python. Well, as it turned out, right about 2 days after I got assigned there and got to kind of know the team, then my 10 had a really high ranking type MOS in the medical field. And so he got a call. He said, I just got a call. I got to be in the train today. They're sending a plane. I got to catch it. I got to go down there. He said, I'll be back tomorrow. We're supposed to get our mission briefing tomorrow, and I'll be back. I said, okay, well, next day came, he wasn't back. And so the operations officer told me, well, we'll give you the briefing because he's supposed to be back. There's a plane leaving out tonight, and he should be back in tomorrow. Okay. So I took the mission briefing rather than the 10. Well, the next morning at 10 o'clock in the morning, the C-130 came in, and he wasn't on it. And they called back down to the Trang, and they said, well, his critical MOS is higher than your need, so therefore he's not coming back. So I immediately became the 10. And I didn't have a 11. I didn't have a 11. So the next day we went up to get the mission briefing at the S3 shop. And so we went up and we started through the briefing, and the briefing, he was a Master Sergeant E8, was giving us the mission briefing. And he asked me about my 11. He said, where's your 11? I said, I don't have one. He said, this is your first recon mission and you're going by yourself? I said, well, that's apparently so. And he said, that's BS. He said, that can't work. And so he said, you don't have anybody else out there that can be your 11? I said, I don't know. I just got into this situation. He said, well, I don't have anything to do for the next week, so hell, I'll go with you. And so he went as my 11. Wow. So here you go. You got a brand new 10 that's never been on the ground as a 10.
and you know, and a Master Sergeant EH that probably hadn't really been out on the ground in a long time. But we had an all-known team, and so we went over. We gave them the briefing, and we did all that kind of stuff. And their eyes were pretty big, but you know, they said, "Hey, okay, let's go." You know, so that's how we went, and we went in, and very, very fortunately, there wasn't anybody on the LZ. We got off the LZ. We moved, and as a matter of fact, they actually put us on the wrong LZ. And that was probably the best thing that happened to us. And so we were able to, and we moved through the area for about 2 days. And we kept hearing lots of activity of, it sounded like wood choppers. It sounded like they were building a base camp. And so we kept moving toward that. Well, we got to what we probably estimated of probably a few hundred meters from them, and we run into some sentries. And so we backed off and moved around, and we kept bouncing off of those. And then finally, they were kind of putting a little bit of pressure on us. And I did have the sense to know that when they start trying to put pressure on you, they're trying to drive you into an ambush. So then we decided, well, we don't want to go that way. We want to go somewhere else. So we went into a very heavy bamboo thicket to try to kind of give them some difficulty in trying to stay behind us quietly. And my 1-1, we were going through there. The going was pretty bad through that bamboo thicket, and there was a bamboo stalk that had gotten broken, cut, or something like that. Anyway, he fell, and when he fell, he grabbed for that bamboo thing. And if you've ever been cut by bamboo, it is sharp. I mean, it split his hand terribly. He was bleeding profusely, and it just so happened that we were getting warning shots behind us from the guys trying to drive us. And so it just so happened Covey came over about that time, and so I told him, "Hey guys, I got a man hurt bad. I got to get him out of here, and they're pushing us pretty hard from behind, and I know there's an ambush up in front of us." And so they said, "Well, okay, we'll pull you out. We'll launch the helicopters." Now, at that point in time, we were launching. We had lost Cam Duck. We used to launch out of Cam Duck, which is right on the border. But once we lost Cam Duck, we had to launch out of FOB4, which meant it took an hour to get to the operational area, and they could only stay on station about 15 minutes before they had to go back and refuel and rearm. So when you got in trouble, you had to be able to run for about an hour before anybody got back to you. So they said, "We'll launch the choppers and get them on the way here to you." I said, "Okay, that's great. We'll keep moving and keep going." And he pointed us to a likely LZ that was about probably a kilometer and a half away. And the going was really slow and really tough. And we got about halfway there, and Covey called and he says, "Hey guys, I'm sorry to tell you this, but there's a big blocking force right in front of you. There's no way you can get to that LZ." He said, "If you'll make a 90-degree turn about 50 meters away, there's a hole in the trees. I think we can get ropes in. We can get McGuire rigs in to you." So again, same thing. Brand new at this game. Never even seen a McGuire rig before. Don't even know anything about it. But anyway, we got to the opening, set up our perimeter. They come up, hovered, put the McGuire rigs down, put the first 4 guys out. We had a 6-man team. We had 4 Nungs and 2 Americans. And so my 1-1 and 3 of the Nungs went out on the first ship. Second ship came in, hovered, dropped the ropes down, and we got in them. Again, I had never even seen a McGuire rig before, didn't really know what it was. And basically it was just a big old horse collar type thing on the end of a 120-foot climbing rope. But the one thing about it was there was a snap link right on the bottom of that horse collar. And what you were supposed to do was take your rucksack and hook it to that snap link on the bottom, so you didn't have that 60 pounds hanging off your back when you were in that rig. And the other thing that you did, that there was a harness loop up there to put your wrist in, so if you did happen to fall out of the rig or anything else, that it'd have to tear your arm off before you totally fell out of the rig. Well, I didn't do either one of those things because I didn't know. And so we went up through the trees, and because we were the second ones out and we didn't have much security left, just me and one more guy. And so they were pushing us pretty hard, and they were really peppering the helicopter pretty bad. So he was eager to get out. And again, the air crews a lot of times didn't have the training that they probably should have had, because as you know, when a helicopter hovers and then once it starts to move forward, it loses altitude until it can get some airspeed. Well, they drug us through the trees for a while. Fortunately, both of us hung on and didn't get really seriously hurt. We got banged around pretty good, but we finally got up. And so we're looking forward to almost 45 minutes to maybe an hour ride before we get back. And so we get up, and the first thing they do is they climb it up to about 5,000 feet. And so you go from just being totally about to die of heat stroke to freezing to death because you're hanging underneath a helicopter running about 60, 70 miles an hour. And again, one of the other things you're supposed to do with those McGuire rigs, or when you're coming out on ropes, is where they come down, where the McGuire rig is attached to the rope, you take a snap link and you snap link those two together so that you hang at the same place. Well, we didn't do that. I was much heavier than my young counterpart, so I was hanging about where my head was, about where his feet were. And we didn't really understand the aerodynamics of that thing, so we were just kind of flying through the air, spinning around, banging into each other. And again, we didn't hook our arm, our loop around our arm, and we had our rucksack hanging on our back. Well, my indige lost his grip, and he fell out of the rig. The absolute miracle happened as he kicked really, really wildly and was yelling, and he kind of threw a half hitch around his ankle with that on that rope. So he's hanging upside down by 1 foot, and he's just about almost even with me by now. So I reach and I grab him and put him in a big arm lock. And so here we are flying through the air, spinning around and everything else, with him getting ready to fall out of that rig at any time. And I'm trying to talk on the radio to talk to the guys to say something. And I mean, it seemed like forever. And, you know, in those kind of situations you get into, a minute can feel like an hour, or sometimes 30 minutes goes by in 10 seconds. So, you know, you just, I don't know how far it was, but out there in that Song Bay River, between Thong Duck and Cam Duck, there was a big horseshoe in the river, and right in the center of that horseshoe was a big sandbar. And all of a sudden, we quit spinning as badly, and the wind wasn't so strong in your face. That's the other thing you don't realize when you're being dragged through the air at 60, 70 miles an hour. It's hard to breathe. You can inhale okay, but you can't exhale. So, finally, all of a sudden it was easier to breathe and that type of stuff. And I looked, and it looked like, hey, the ground's a whole lot closer. What's going on here? Well, apparently the crew chief could see what was going on, what a disaster it was down underneath there. So they sat down on that sandbar, and by that time, by not riding, both of us had slipped down to where just that rig was just right in the bend of our knee. Well, it cuts the blood circulation off to your feet, so we stumbled around like a bunch of drunk sailors. And but we gathered up the ropes, gathered everything, we got back into the aircraft, and started back to FOB4. And we still had about a 30-minute flight to get there. And once I got on and got in, and I got a headset, and I was talking to the crew and the crew chief, and I said, "Man, did you guys get hit?" And they said, "Nah, we didn't even get shot at." And I said, "Well, let me tell you what, friend. I don't know about getting hit or not, but I guarantee you got shot at." He said, "Nah, man, we didn't take no hits." I said, "Okay." So anyway, we get about 15, 20 minutes out, and the co-pilot kind of taps the pilot and says, "We must have burned a lot of fuel dragging these guys underneath, and there must be a lot of wind resistance or something." He said, "Man, we're not going to make it back. We got to stop short and get some fuel." And they said, "Okay." So we stopped at a little Marine camp down there south of Da Nang. And so the crew chief got out, and we're sitting there, and it's idling, and all of a sudden the crew chief just starts yelling, and "What's going on? What's going on?" Well, fuel was running out of it as fast as he could put it in it. It had 7 bullet holes right through the fuel cells on that thing. Fortunately, none of them was a tracer. But we got enough in to limp it back to Da Nang. So that was my very first recon mission.
Holy cow! Very first one. I mean, that's crazy for your first entrance into cross-border operations.
So so anyway, once we got back and we got everything settled in, got my master sergeant. We got him to the hospital, and he had severed a whole bunch of nerves, ligaments, and everything else. They medevaced him to Japan. And at that point in time, we had CNC Command and Control had been losing a lot of people. So we had a lot of teams that were not up to par as far as manpower goes. So they went through a complete reorganization. We went from 18 teams down to 12. And so everybody got moved around and to fill up teams and that kind of thing. That's when I got uh, that's when I got reassigned as a 1-1 to Team Coral.
Mm.
And Team Python was just deactivated, and it stayed inactive for probably 6 months or so before it was reactivated. All of my nungs were distributed among the other nung teams, so they got to be with their friends and that type of thing. So everything worked out okay. So I came in as a 1-1 to and the 1-0 was a guy named Hatcher, and he was going to rotate in 6 weeks. So I went on 2 missions with Hatcher as the 1-0, and they were relatively uneventful. Uh, Basically, we were just like on area recon, trying to out there. just across the border from Camden. Oh, I mean from Camden. There was a main supply route, and there was a lot of activity out there. And the rumor was that there was a really big buildup going on, and so they were wanting to know what's going on out there along that area. So we were putting a lot of teams in there, and of course, when they have moving a lot of people, they have pretty good security. So very few of us stayed over about 3 days because they would get on you pretty quick and push you really hard, and then and you'd have to come out. So, but we were really fortunate in that we had a really good tail gunner, and he kept us in good shape. We never really got anybody up behind us close enough that he could keep them at bay, and so we did our missions there. So after after those missions, then Hatcher rotated, and I became the 1-0, and they gave us a week for me to train and do all of those things and get ready to take the next mission. And as a matter of fact, on the morning of August the 23rd, we were scheduled.
Gotta hang on a minute, guys. Oh, there we go.
Okay, we were scheduled to get our mission briefing, and of course, you know what happened on on August the 23rd. So that after that, I went to the hospital, and I spent 31 days on a hospital ship, the USS Sanctuary, and I can explain a little bit more about that, in that I'm one of the most fortunate people on this planet right now.
Yes, sir.
And then after I came back, I mean, I begged, pleaded, did everything I could to the Navy doctor that I wanted to go back to camp. He was determined to send me to Japan because one of my wounds I had, I lost most of the feeling in my right hand. It severed the ulnar nerve in my right arm. And I kept telling him, no, I want to go back to camp. I got to get back to camp. And so finally, on the USS hospital ship, you can only stay on that 30 days. After 30 days, you either have to go back to duty or get medevac further back somewhere else, either Japan or Philippines or somewhere else like that. So on the last day, I got that doctor and I said, look, what you don't understand is I'm an infantry officer. An infantry officer's only got one requirement, and that's to fire his weapon. And I said, this finger and this thumb works just good. I am 100% capable of being back for duty. And he said, you're the hard-headedest little bastard I ever saw. He said, if that's what you want to do, then so be it. And I said, okay. So the next day we pulled into the Nang Harbor. And of course, when you come on board, all you're wearing is a green bloody hospital sheet. And so they give me a set of Navy dungarees. So I come, and they just put me out on the dock, and I found a Marine truck heading toward MCAS, which was down close to where our camp was, FOB4. So I got a ride about halfway down and got out at MCAS, started walking down the road with my thumb out, and another guy picked me up my deuce and a half and dropped me off at the front gate of the camp. And the nuns were pretty concerned about this unusual looking Navy guy showing up at the camp. But I was finally able to convince them to call the TOC. And then once I got a hold of the TOC, I told them, hey, this is Lieutenant Mills. I'm out of the hospital. I'm back to duty. They sent me somebody down to the gate to get me in, tell the nuns not to shoot me, and let me in. And so then and then in order to let me out, the Navy doctor put me on a 6-month light duty profile. Well, what are you going to do in a war zone with a light duty profile, right? So, so I started working with the S3 Air with Major Toomey, and he says, you can work here for a little while till you continue to get healed up and all that kind of stuff. And I'd been there probably about 2 weeks, and they got a levy from Saigon. They needed a 1-0 qualified officer to start this new school and operate it and be the OIC of this new school they were starting, the 1-0 school. Because we had lost so many of our qualified 1-0s, and most everybody coming in the country didn't have any experience at all. And so they said, we got to have some people that can do this. And that's how I wound up going down to the 1-0 school. So, and so, on that venue, the rest is kind of history there. Right? And we can go into that a little bit later. But on the 23rd, we were getting ready and been planning and getting ready to go on our first mission. And we went to bed that night, and there were 6 of us lieutenants that lived in this one hooch. And it was it was right on the corner of of all of the hooches in the camp. It was the one most exposed. Excuse me. And that night, me and one of my buds, Jeff Fullen, just before turning in for the night, we went out to the latrine, and boy, there were all kinds of flares and stuff going up, and we were right behind Marble Mountain. We were right up against the base of Marble Mountain. So when they shot rockets, they couldn't really hit us with rockets, because if the rocket cleared the mountain, it went over us. And obviously, if it was on the trajectory to hit us, it hit the other side of Marble Mountain. So the only thing they could do was mortar us. But the rockets were coming over, and they were pounding MCAS pretty bad down there. And they were down the road from us a couple of miles or so. So Jeff Fullen was there, and Jeff said, "Well, it looks like the Marines are catching hell tonight." And I said, "Yeah, I'm glad it's them and not us." So we went to bed. Well, the next thing we knew, I woke up with a tremendous explosion. And what had happened is they threw a satchel charge in the hooch right next to ours. It totally destroyed that hooch, blew the sides out. It totally collapsed, killed everybody inside. And needless to say, it woke us up big time. Got up, and I had my rifle, all my web gear stuff was on a nail hanging right by my bunk. I mean, it was up, just stuck my feet in my boots, didn't tie them or anything, didn't even put on a shirt, just put on my web gear, grabbed my Car 15, and I was the first one out the door. As soon as I cleared the door, right out of the corner of my eye, I saw an individual, an Asian person. Well, that wasn't any big deal. We had 700 indig in camp. We had Nungs and Montagnards in the Hatchet Force and in our teams and all that kind of stuff. My initial thought was, this is one of our guys. He's heading toward his defensive position, just like me, because we had not heard any small arms up until that point. It had all been explosions, and we thought we were just being mortared. And so I cleared the door, and I had just got out the door. A guy named Crabb, Lieutenant Crabb, was right behind me, and Jeff Bullen was right behind him. And as soon as I come out the door, I saw this guy, and I hesitated that half a second, and that's all it took, because he knew who I was and he knew what he was going to do. So he opened up on me. He hit me, first round hit me in the stomach, spun me around. I went down on the ground right in front of the hooch. He had it on full automatic, so it climbed a little bit left and right on him. He hit Crabb in the thigh and in the magazine pouch, and in the magazine pouch round knocked him completely back into the hooch, and he knocked Jeff back into the hooch. So they both went down. I'm down on the ground, and it's really unusual at what you think in times like that, how your mind works. But I was really angry. I was really mad because I thought I'd been shot by a friendly. I thought somebody, one of our guys got buck fever and shot me. So, you can't sit around a club and talk about being shot by your own guy. Hey, come on. So anyway, I'm really pissed. So I jumped up and I said, "You son of a bitch, I'm an American." Well, he shot me again. So now I'm really mad. So I'm going to shoot this guy. I don't care if he is a friendly. So I get up again. He shot me again. I get up one more time. And he shot me one more time. And and finally, I always say I'm a slow learner. It only took 5 rounds for me to figure out, if you quit getting up, maybe this guy quit shooting you. So I laid down and I stayed down the last time he hit me. The last time he hit me, he hit right in the back of the neck. And so I laid down. He walked over, and he was barefoot. They worked in teams of 3. One guy had an AK and just had all kinds of magazines. One guy carried satchel charges, and the other guy had a board-type device strapped to his chest and had those Chi-Com grenades on it. And he just had grenades, and he would throw grenades. They had them rigged so that when he grabbed it and pulled it off, that it struck the fuse on that thing. So all he had to do was jerk it off of that board and throw them. So they worked in those 3-man teams. And all they had was a loincloth, and they had a banner, they had a scarf around their head, and they were barefoot. Otherwise, they were completely naked. So they could feel the wire and touch the wires and things when they were coming through the concertina. But so he was standing there, and I was looking right straight at his foot. It wasn't just 6 inches away from my face. And I know he had the barrel of that AK right in the back of my head. And at that exact second, there was some kind of a commotion that happened right inside the hooch. And like I said, I was laying on the ground right at the base of the steps right outside the hooch. So and at that point in time, he had his back to the door. Well, when that noise occurred, he immediately forgot about me, spun around, and on full automatic just sprayed inside the hooch, emptied the whole magazine in there. Well, everybody was on the floor except Jeff Bullen. Jeff got hit in the hand, but that's the only one that got hit. So after he did that, took the magazine out, put in a new magazine, walked around to the corner of the hooch, and he kneeled down and was looking back around toward the back door, waiting for someone to come get me. And he knew someone was going to come out of that hooch to get me. And so I'm laying there, and my head is right at the base of the bottom step. And Bob Blather came to the door. And in my best stage whisper, I said, "Bob, don't come out." And he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, there's Bob right there in the center. But anyway, uh, I said, "He's right over there on the corner, and he's waiting for you to come out." So Bob looked out, and he looked down. He said, uh, "I don't see anything." And I said, "Bob, did you see a sandbag about 4 sandbags up that's sticking out further than the other ones?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Shoot it." He said, "You want me to shoot a sandbag?" "Shoot the damn sandbag." Okay. So he eased the rifle out real slow down the edge, squeezed the trigger. When he squeezed the trigger, I'm up back in the hooch and all of that. And so, and when I got back from the hospital, I never saw it. I don't know. But anyway, I was told the next morning as they were doing the final sweep of the camp and all of that kind of stuff, they they found him right at the corner with a bullet hole right between his eyes. So he was looking right down the barrel when Bob pulled the trigger. So anyway, we got back in the hooch, and one of the most amazing things that it still amazes me to this day. I had 5 bullet holes in me, and I had no pain whatsoever. I mean, I didn't have pain. Now I couldn't use my right hand very well, but it didn't hurt. And so I'm there, and they've been working trying to get. Crab got hit and severed his femoral artery. He was bleeding profusely, and they were trying to get that under control. And they started trying to work on me. Jeff Fullen got over, and man, he was saying, "Oh, you're okay, Trav. You're going to live, Trav. Trav, you're going to be okay." Well, once he convinced me I was going to live, man, the hurt come in big time. All of a sudden, that pain my body had been ignoring became very, very evident, and that type thing. So, and our hooch was taking rounds from just about everywhere. So finally, somebody said, "We got to get out of this hooch." And probably about 10 or 15 meters outside our back door was a 4 deuce mortar pit. So everybody said, "Hey, we got to get to the mortar pit. Let's get out in that mortar pit." So we got out in the 4 deuce pit, and Jeff Fullen got over, and he was taking the rounds out, pulling charges on them, handing them to me. I'd hand them to the gunner, and he'd drop them down tubes. And so we were putting up illumination. That's what we were doing on the camp, because it was just 3 o'clock in the morning. It was totally dark, and all the lights were out. The generators had been blown up, and all of that. So we did that, and then finally, Bob Blather said, "Man, we got to get out of here. I got to do something." So Bob got out of the mortar pit, and he took off down between the hooches. Again, I don't know if it was 10 minutes. I don't know if it was 30 minutes. I don't know how long it was. But he showed up with a Jeep. I don't know where he found a Jeep or anything else, but he had a Jeep. So he stopped there. We loaded Crab in because he was definitely the one most hurt bad. And so Bob took off to take him up to the dispensary. And it was probably about 300-400 meters up to the dispensary. And when he was pulling away, he said, "Trav, I'll be back and get you in a little bit." "Okay, Bob, I'll be here." So, and we stayed there in the mortar pit, and there were just all kinds of people wandering all over the camp. You didn't know who was friendly, who wasn't friendly, or anything else. There were just firefights everywhere. And in a little bit, Bob came back. And so I got in the Jeep and off we went. And we went up through the camp and we had two tactical operation centers. The old TOC was nothing but just a burning pile of rubble. I mean, they had totally blown it up, killed several people in it. The mess hall was burning and shot up bad. A lot of buildings on fire. And so we wandered up through the camp. He got me up to the dispensary and slid to a stop, and said, "Okay, Trav, I'll see you later." Okay, fine. He took off into the night, and I found out that I think he picked up 4 or 5 more people that night and got them to the dispensary. And so anyway, I got in the dispensary. I got in there, and I'll go into a little detail. They looked through things. The round through my arm totally missed the bone by a few millimeters. It was just a gunshot wound, just right through, and put a bandage on it, and it was okay. Probably the biggest fortunate thing for me was when he shot me. I was at a 90-degree angle to him. So the bullet went across. It hit me in the right side of the stomach and went out the left. And as it turned out, and whether it's absolute miracles or divine intervention, who knows? That bullet, the surgeon later on told me that my stomach had a burn mark just like a rope burn. That it did not penetrate the stomach. It just tore all the muscle tissue out in front. If it had penetrated the stomach, I would have never survived. Again, the one in the arm, if it had hit the bone, it would have probably blown the arm off, and I would have probably bled out there. He shot me right underneath the shoulder blade. Again, I was on the ground trying to get up. I was on my hands and knees. He shot and hit me in the back, right under the shoulder blade. And if you'll remember, all high-powered rifles, especially the AK or the M16 with the high point front sight, round comes out high. So if you point it directly at somebody, it's going to come out high. It's just like when you zeroed, 3.75 inches is where that thing comes out. Well, he was pointing it directly at me, and he would just almost miss me. I mean, just barely hit me. So the one in the back of the shoulder, it didn't penetrate very deep. It just made it kind of a long, gash across the back. Same way, it hit me right in the back of the head and right in the back of the neck. Same thing. The one in the back of the neck missed my spinal column by 3 millimeters. So I am absolutely the most blessed person on this planet on that. Again, they saw that these are not, if they could get the blood flow under control, get the bleeding under control, then I went way down on the critical list as far as there were other people that were a lot worse off. So they put me over, and one of the things that happened, Charlie Pfeiffer, our company commander, when I was laying on the floor in the hooch, Charlie come in, and that's Pfeiffer. Charlie came in, and he said, my gun's jammed, I need a gun. So I gave him my Car 15. I said, here, you use this. He gave me his 9mm. So I'm still got a 9mm. So I'm up at the dispensary. I still got that 9mm with me. So they said, well, we don't want no surprises, and you're not really critical right now. Go guard the back door. Okay, sounds good to me. So I go back and I put me a couple of chairs together so I could lay down. If I didn't make any real fast moves, I could stay relatively comfortable. It was tolerable. And they were I was right outside the surgery door, and they were working on Scully. He was our chief medic. Scully had got hit right in the base of the skull. Man, they were working on him absolutely furious. And finally they said, if we don't get him to the hospital, he's not going to make it. And they said, we can't get choppers in. It's too hot. There's too much going on, and they can't get in. And they said, the only option we got is we got an old cracker box ambulance. And the Navy Field Hospital was about 5 miles down the road, just the other side of MCAS, Marine Corps Air Station. And they said, how's the road? They said, same as always. It's bad. And they said, well, that's our only choice. So there was a little buck sergeant medic, and he said, I'll drive it. I'll drive that ambulance. And so they loaded Scully and two of the other guys. I think Crab was probably one of the others. They loaded the three worst guys in the back of that ambulance. And they come over to me, and he said, can you ride shotgun? I said, absolutely, let's go. So we got in the van, got in the ambulance. I gave the 45 to the driver, and he gave me his M16. So we went out and we were sitting at the front gate, waiting them to clear all of the barricades and stuff out of the front gate so we could get out on the road and go down the road. And just as we were sitting there and they were pulling it back, the medic looked at me and he said, sir, I sure hope they don't want to waste a real good ambush on a ragged ass old Jeep. And I said, I hope so too. So let's do it. And man, we made a right turn out of the gate and down the road we went. And I've always said, I don't know what that young man's career was, but he'd have been a hell of a NASCAR driver, I'll tell you.
Holy cow.
So anyway, we took some rounds going down the road, and but we didn't get hit, and nobody in the back got hit. We just, matter of fact, we had a couple of rounds through the windshield, but that was about it. And so we got to the hospital, and they took all those three guys in, and as a side note, all three of them survived. So they looked at me, and again, I'm not critical. I'm not in the, unless I get a serious infection or something like that, I'm not critical right now. So I go on a stretcher out here on the sawhorses outside. I'm out there for about, probably a couple of 3 hours. They come around and they said, man, we got more people coming in. We got no room. Our OR is not going to open up for who knows. They said, we're going to take you over to Monkey Mountain to the Marine Hospital over there. And I said, okay. So they loaded 6 of us on the helicopter. We went over to Monkey Mountain, back on the sawhorses. So I wait there for another few hours. It was just, it'd been daylight for a little while before I finally got into an OR. So they put me in the OR, and the guy come up to put the IV in my arm, and he says, this is going to smart a little bit. And I said, don't worry, man. You don't know how long I've been waiting for that. That's the last thing I remember saying. And so the next thing I knew, I woke up in the recovery ward, and I was there. About to start feeling sorry for myself. I had bandages everywhere. My left arm my right arm was all taped down to my chest, and I had bandages everywhere. And I was really starting to feel sorry for myself. And when you're coming out from under the anesthesia, you do all kinds of weird stuff. You yell, you kick, do all kinds of stuff. And they were wheeling a young Marine. He was probably 19, 20 years old. They were wheeling him out of the OR or out of the OR and putting him over here in the recovery area. They wheeled him up right next to me. And as I said, I was just in the very first stages of really starting to feel sorry for myself. why me, all that. And this young man in his kicking and yelling and so forth kicked the sheet off. When he kicked the sheet off, his left leg was gone just below the knee, his right leg was gone just above the knee, and his left arm was gone right above the elbow. And he had bandages all over him. And I looked at him, and I can tell you right now, I heard my grandmother's voice just as plain as anything. And my grandparents always called me boy. Said, "Hey, boy, come here." They said, "Boy, you got no complaint coming. Get your butt up out of that bed and get well." And that, I mean, all of the quote, sad feelings and depression and all that went away. And I said, I am lucky. I am good. I got both hands. I got both legs. I probably won't win any Miss America contest with this, or Mr. America contest with this big scar across my stomach, but hey, that's okay. I can live with that. So, I mean, that was one of the most life-changing moments that I ever experienced. And I don't know that kid's name because, I don't know, probably 30 minutes after that, they came in and said, "We don't have room for you here." So they loaded me and 6 other guys on the chopper, and we went to the USS Sanctuary about 5 miles off coast. And that's where I spent for the next 30 days. But I don't know what that kid's name was, but I think about him every day, and I hope he, did well. But I'll never forget him, and he made a tremendous change in my life.
I mean, that's amazing. And I was curious about reading some of the stuff that's been written in the past few years and Mr. John Stryker Meyer's books. While all of this, and I can't imagine unless you were told with everything going on, but did you know that Larry Trimble and St. Rattler were up on the hill doing their best to shoot down launch mortars and get moonbeam overhead?
No. I knew there was somebody up there. I didn't know it was Larry Trimble. I didn't know what team was up there, but there was always a team up on top of Marble Mountain. And as a matter of fact, at one point in time, when I was in the Hatchet Force, about 2 days before I got there, my platoon came down from the up on top of Marble Mountain. So somebody was up there all the time. It just was, and I knew there was somebody up there, but I didn't know who it was. But that was just part of the routine duty in camp. That was one of the duties that came around that you and your team was going to get every once in a while.
I didn't realize until reading through Jason Hardy's team history books that there was actually 2 SOG listening posts. One, Ostrich, was where the Hatchet Force guys would be. I don't know if at the same time, but and then the Kiwi outpost was for you guys on the recon teams and such as that. And
right.
I'd never seen these with it actually laid out. And boy, that really puts in perspective how steep, narrow, and very little real estate y'all had up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
it was, just like kind of like a Custer's Last Stand up there. They would put us up there in the chopper. The bad guys had to climb up the side of that thing. So we had somewhat of an advantage, even though we were outnumbered.
I mean, that's there's some great photos of here's one. I think this is Ostrich looking over to Kiwi, and where they can shoot in between and such as that. But We've also heard some stories from, I think, Captain Carr, David Carr, and a few
Yep.
other guys, Tilt, and Mr. Larry Trimble told me that, that they literally had spider holes or whatever, you trap doors to where they could sneak out of the cave, out of the pagoda area and try and get up behind y'all and start ambushing y'all on top of the mountain.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Those mountains were just full of caves. It was just like a honeycomb. I mean, it was kind of like a big giant ant hill. There were all kinds of caves and stuff. Now, Dave Carr and I were roommates. He was in that same hooch with me the night on the 23rd.
Oh, well, I had forgotten about that he was rooming with you that night.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise. Mr. Dave is like Forrest Gump. He was everywhere when big stuff was happening over in Thailand with Tony Poe at the SAPPER attack. He was at FOB4 during the siege. I mean, he was everywhere.
Yeah. Dave was a good guy. I enjoyed Dave.
He's a very good man and very quiet professional like all of y'all, and he's helped me out in my SOG research and all of that. And I actually wanted to show you this photo. This is from either Bob, I think this is Mr. Bob's grandson graduating Ranger School, but he invited Mr. Dave to come be there when he passed Ranger School. So there's Mr. Bob and Mr. Dave right there for his grandson's Ranger graduation.
It was me and Bob and Dave Carr. I can't remember Phil Balzo.
Oh, I've got a photo of him too. Wow.
Phil Balzo and one other. Who else? Crab. There were 6 of us. Yep, that's him.
Yeah, that's a great photo. I mean, that is one of the shortest M79s I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, we all had them. Carried them like a pistol on your web gear.
I've seen some of y'all make some very cool, almost Western pistol holsters for them. I mean, that's some. And after hearing about how effective they are in the jungle, I can see why y'all would carry that along with a Car 15. I mean, that's almost like your mini anti-personnel little rocket launcher or mortar if you needed to do it.
That was one of the great things about our recon teams. I mean, and Tilt Meyer, John Meyer, he goes into this a great deal in his books about when the bad guys messed with a 6-man recon team, one of our teams, they come out losing big time. I mean, we lost some teams and that type of thing, and we had a lot of people get shot up and beat up and everything else. But I mean, just like Lynn Black went up against an entire division out there and killed about 600 of them. I mean, just because we were top priority for airstrikes. We could get airstrikes and the spook ships, and a recon team went in. Every man carried 600 rounds of ammunition, and most of us had an N79 with a few rounds. There we had claymores. Plus, we had all of the air support and everything else out there. I mean, the bad guys literally would be like grabbing a tiger by the tail when you jumped on a 6-man recon team. I mean, even a platoon or a company might have made it an even match, because we made them pay dearly for getting after one of our teams, and because we just went in so heavy. And the other side of the mental side is, man, you better fight with everything you got, because that's the only way out.
I mean that and like you said, from Mr. John's Striker Myers books, John Plaster's, I mean, and Lynn Black's biography. I mean, y'all definitely got up against some superior odds, and some of those stories, it's amazing guys made it out. There were some losses, but it's absolutely amazing guys were coming out like they were. And I've been reading a book here recently about the leaks within SOG and all of that, and you know, the Walker family literally giving away y'all's encrypted communication thing where they could find out exactly when, where, and what time y'all were launching the operation. And it's always surprised me how well y'all did up against all those odds.
Yeah. The week before I joined Team Coral, they went in on a mission, and the pilot wouldn't get down really low, and they had to jump from about 15 feet from the helicopter. And when they jumped, the interpreter hit a log and broke his ankle. And Hatcher, telling the story, you know, he was so mad because, man, we got in, everything is quiet. Man, first time we've been able to get on the ground and God knows how many times, and now you break your damn foot, and now we got to call for an extraction and all that kind of stuff. Well, so he called the choppers and said, "Hey, we got a guy broke foot. You gotta come in and pick him up. And if you come back in and hover and stay here long enough to pick him up, everybody in this part of the universe is going to know where we're at. So we're just going to go out of here." And so they said, "Okay, we'll come back in." When they made the circle to come back, they told him to pop smoke. When he popped smoke, the whole tree line opened up on him. And very fortunately, they were on a very sharp angle on the side of a hill. And when that RPD machine gun, they couldn't get it down far enough, and it went right over their head. And the gunships were still there. The gunships hadn't left yet. So, man, they started pounding them and all that kind of stuff. And, they got back out again. But it was the thing. They got smart. They knew we were coming. They knew where we were going, and let the helicopters get gone before you open up on them. But if those helicopters hadn't have came back, and he hadn't have broken his foot, and they came back, that would have been one of the teams that would have been totally wiped out. It would have gone. So they knew where we were coming and when we were coming. It got pretty bad for a while.
Yes, sir. It seems like, especially that 67, 68, 69 time frame was very, very dangerous for you guys. I had a question as we're gonna start heading into long time, because we're about an hour and a half now, and I don't want to hold you all day here. I have found some really great photos. As you mentioned, you were in the Hatchet Forces, and there were two photos I was curious about. Both are very famous. Well, one specifically being very famous, of you guys with Mr. Charge and Charlie in all black. Was this the FOB4 Hatchet Force?
Yes. Okay. That was Second Company HOB Hatchet Force.
Wow. Okay. And I remember you saying, or I thought I remember you saying you weren't with them too long. Did y'all get a chance to go out at all before you went over to the Recon Company, or?
Yes, I did 3 missions with the Hatchet Force.
Wow.
Probably the biggest one that we did is we took one full company of our Hatchet Force and a company from Charlie 1 Mike Force.
Oh.
And we went out, and again, I said there was a big MSR, main supply route, from coming down through. It came past Cam Duck, came back, come by Thong Duck, and then came on in. And so we went in and blocked. There was a place where they crossed the Song Bay River. They had a ford there. It was, you couldn't see it during the daytime. The water was just, and they would kind of divert the river a little bit, and they could get their trucks and stuff across. They had a pretty good bridge underneath the water, and they would divert it so that they could go across at night. And so we took those two companies in. We staged in Thong Duck, and then they airlifted us by helicopter from Thong Duck up on top of the mountain ridge. And then we went down the mountain ridge all the way down to the Song Bay River, where that main MSR crossed the river, and we blocked that place. We shut down their supply route.
Wow.
And
that's a hot area, because I know John Wegner from Thong Duck, but also some Force Recon men who ran missions out of Thong Duck for a while, and they said it was hot as hot could be.
Yeah. And so we blocked that river, or we blocked that MSR, and they put up with it for about 2 days. And they were moving people in. They moved in heavy guns, 50 calibers, mortars, all kinds of stuff. And then they started really putting the pressure. Well, when we started trying to come out, there were more air crews on the ground than there were infantry people. I mean, we had a big time fight trying to get out of it. But anyway, Charlie Pfeiffer was the overall commander of the whole thing. And then Bob Bladwick moved up to be the company commander, and I moved in and took Bob's platoon for that operation. And again, that was one of the major ones that we did out there.
That's why I've was lucky enough to get speak to Mr. Charlie Chuck and get his biography, and it's a wonderful book. I recommend for everybody, especially his segment of talking about clearing out the stragglers that were in the toilet the next morning. That's a rather wild story. I won't ruin it for y'all, but you can imagine what he does.
Yep. Charlie was a heck of a good guy. I hadn't seen Charlie in quite a few years. I saw him at SOAR a few years ago. I haven't seen him lately, but he was a good guy. I really liked Charlie.
He is in our Facebook group and online and active. He, of course, is getting on up in age, but he is active as can be and doing quite well from all I can gather. He's will comment and talk a little bit every now and again and all of that. So it's nice to have him getting to share some of his wild history as well. There was another one, and I wasn't sure if this was Hatchet Forces, considering you had 210s with you, the legendary Jim Hetrick, and I believe Charlie Miller. This photo, I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, that's at Long Con. They were on my staff at Long Con.
Oh, Mr. Jim, was he one of your first instructors?
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. Mr. Jim is a great man. Jim and I are good friends. But and so is Charlie Miller. He was that, and Tahan there, our interpreter. He spoke maybe 10 words of English, but that was more than anybody else. This was actually at Long Con when we trained a full mountain yard company rather than recon teams. We were given the mission to train. They needed a new mountain yard company up in FOB4. So they recruited a whole tribe. I mean, we had 13-year-olds to 50-year-olds,
and loaded them on two C-130s and brought them down to Longton, and we trained an entire Mountain Yard company. It took us about 6 weeks, and then loaded them on an airplane and sent them back. And man, their first, I'll tell you a story about that too, but they did well. They did a great accounting of themselves. They did quite well. But, and we can go ahead and go into Longton. So, you know, like I say, I got tasked, and first thing you know, I'm on a bird going to Saigon. And so I get to Saigon and I go down on Pasteur Street to MACV-SOG headquarters. And I get the briefing about, okay, we're losing people and we need people and all that kind of stuff. And so the Army solution is you got to have a school. So we're going to have a school. And Colonel Johnson was Op 35 commander, which was cross-border operations, recon border operations is Op 35. And Colonel Cavanaugh was Chief SOG. He was the rankingest colonel in South Vietnam. And so they brought me in, gave me the briefing about, okay, we're losing people. Basically, your mission is that we got to take these guys. You can't make them a 1-0 in 3 weeks, but you can make them a good 1-1, and he can make an important contribution to the team while his 1-0, can continue to school him as he goes through. But we understand that. We understand you can't make a 1-0 in 3 weeks. So that was, quote, the mission. And I said, well, what about instructors? And they said, we promise you, you will have good instructors. My first instructors, Charlie Miller, Dick Gross, Squirrel Sprouse, Jim Hetrick. I mean, I had some of the legendary 1-0 and 1-1 as my instructors. I mean, these guys were really, really good, and they took the Dick. They took the job very, very seriously, and because every one of us felt like, man, what it would have. Because most of them were just like me. That's how they learned. Man, they got their first mission, out the door they went. And you learned on the ground. If you survived, you graduated. So they understood, said, it'd really been nice to have been able to kind of really understand what we were getting into the first time we jumped off that helicopter out there somewhere. So we took it very, very seriously, and there was no academics involved. There was no written test. It didn't go on your 201 file or anything else. Nobody ever knew you went to the 1-0 school. But the thing was, our job was make sure they could survive the first 2 missions that they went on. That was our job. And I had some great guys that knew how to do that. And so once I got the briefing at Saigon, and I went down, the next day they took me out to Longton, and Longton, there were all kinds of projects in Longton. And if you weren't part of Borden, you didn't ask about it. You didn't go into the area or anything else. You didn't ask about any of the other projects. You just, you were concerned with your particular area, and everybody honored that. That was a fine deal. But it was a good camp. There wasn't a whole lot of nickel dime stuff went on. You were there to train, and that was it. You trained and trained hard and all of that. So we got out to Longton, And the guy that brought me out there from the S3 shop, he went in and explained to him, yeah, that's good old Long Tom. It was a big camp, as you can see. And you know, that thing has been around since back in the 30s. That the French established it, I think, initially, and then the Japanese took it over during World War II. The French came back, and then after the French left, the CIA took it, and then they later on gave it to MACV-SOG. So it has a long, long history of being one of those super secret camps. But anyway, so they took me out there and explained to the S3 about all of the things that's going on. And they said, oh, we're having a school here? I said, you know, they were the second ones to find out after me. So after the guy went back, he said, man, I got to get back on the road. I can't get back to Saigon before it gets dark. So he took off. And we figured, okay, let's everybody get a good night's sleep and let's get together in the morning and see what we need to do. Okay. So we got together the next morning and figured out how we're going to fund this thing, where we're going to get training materials, where we're going to get ammunition, you know, all that kind of stuff that goes into this thing that is not in their budget. It's not in their game plan right now. So we got to figure all this out and get it started. So one of the most fortunate things that happened to me is when I was in Delta Company of the 7th, I had a time period there where I kicked and screamed all the way, but I got assigned as an S4. And, you know, nobody wants to be the supply guy. But I spent about 3 months being the S4 for Delta Company of the 7th. Learned a tremendous amount about the way the supply system works. It was one of the most, I think, best pieces of knowledge that I had as I went on in my Army career, because most of the people didn't have a clue how the supply system works. And my commanders used to just get amazed at me and say, how did you find that stuff? How did you get that stuff? I know how the system works. And, you know, basically it's payola. And and there's a story behind that too. But anyway.
And I mean, you had mentioned and I'm going to be linking all of these articles that you've written about the FOB being overrun the attack, as well as your Sentinel 10 school writings that you've done. But I found it interesting that the whole base at that time was Op 34. So you guys in Op 35, being the ground guys, are kind of, I don't want to say black sheep, but y'all aren't the most important guys on the totem pole here. And like you said, y'all are not getting half of the supplies y'all need to run a 10 school course. I found that to be, like you said, mastering the supplies and learning how to get what you need. I found that to be very interesting. I mean, y'all had to scratch, grab, and do what y'all could to get everything y'all had.
Right. Yeah. And that, you know, I mean, it really, you're exactly right. I mean, we were definitely those other guys when we first got there. But as it turned out, you know, pretty soon some of our especially our trainees and our instructors came in. Well, them and part of the cadre and from Op 34 there, they all know each other from Fort Bragg and all that kind of stuff, from Germany, from the 10th group. You know, and so all of a sudden, I say all of a sudden, after a while, when they said, you know, these guys are here, they're doing an important job, they're working hard. So we all kind of melded into this one big team. And then we had a change at SOG headquarters, and they eventually put the 10 school as part of Long Ton's assignment. They said this is part of Long Ton, so what it needs, its budget has to cover all of it too. So when they redid all of the stuff, then they could order anything they wanted to Long Ton to support us. so they could, they were given the authority to give us all full support. And down toward the end, when I left country, I mean, it was all one camp. It wasn't no more Op 34, Op 35 type things. We were just all one big bunch. And, the strata teams and all that other kind of stuff. So, but anyway, so once we got there and they told me that in X number of days, the instructors were going to arrive and we were going to have 2 weeks to get ready. So I got all these instructors in. We got in the room and sat down and said, okay, how do we do this stuff? Well, how we all learned is when somebody come back from a mission, everybody sits around the table in the club and they said, you had dogs. How do you get rid of dogs? Or you had trackers. How do you get rid of trackers? Or you run up against this thing. How do you do that? What do you do there? Or what did you find? Somebody runs into a new situation and he comes back and he tells everybody else. It's just everybody sitting around the table and having a conversation. And so we all agreed, that is an excellent learning system. We don't need to have all of these lesson plans and all this other kind of stuff and everything. Yes, we have to have a general outline. We have to have it organized so we kind of know what we want to do. But basically, when these 20 students would come in and we'd have one or two of the instructors would be in charge of the thing, and maybe we were doing, we didn't teach land navigation. We said, you better know how to read a map. We don't have time to teach you. You've been through all the courses, and same thing. We're not going to teach you how to adjust artillery because you ain't got no artillery. So they know you're wasting time on that. We are going to teach you how to call in airstrikes and how to do that kind of stuff and everything. We're going to teach you what is important. And we're not going to waste time on stuff you don't need. And all these 10s and me, we sit down and we come up with a list of this is what you really need to know. When I first hit the ground on my first time out, what would I have liked to have known? And that's what we taught. And how we taught it is the guy would get up, give a brief introduction, and kind of give just a general overview of, what we were going to be doing that day and that type of stuff. And then, okay, any question is valid. Start asking questions. And then they would ask, and it would go around the room with the experienced 10s and say, okay, in this situation, this is what I did. This is not theory out of some textbook that if this happens, you do this and you do that because the enemy will do this. No, you don't know what they're going to do. And he said, this is what I did in this situation, and this is what worked, and this is what didn't. And that's how we taught it. And and it worked extremely well. We utilized our time. Now, probably 60% of our time, of that whole 2 weeks, 60% of it was what we called IA drill, immediate action drill. When you're going down the trail and you get hit, the first 10 seconds of that firefight is going to determine a big part of the outcome. And what you do, you don't think about what to do, and none of your team thinks about what to do. They do it instinctively right now. And gain fire superiority, and everybody knows what the man in front of them, the man behind them is going to do. And we react immediately because we have to gain the upper hand. That is the only way you will survive, is in that first 10 seconds, you have got to take charge of that firefight. And that's what we spent. We spent time, frontal attack, side attack, whatever, rear attack, flank here, flank there, whatever. That's what we spent our time doing. Every one of them live fire. We did live fire exercises. And everybody and we rotated people. You know, one guy'd be the point man, then the next time he might be the tail gunner, or he might be the third guy in the line, or whatever. But every man knew every position and all that kind of stuff because he had to train his indig. And said, you know, when you leave here, that's your job because your life depends on how well you train your indig and how well they know. And there ain't no talk. Nobody talks. Everybody knows what to do. You know how you hand and arm signals. Once you're on the ground, you know, you might as well put a muzzle on because you don't need to be talking. And so it was a really intensive 2 weeks. Of, you know, we did instruction at Long Pond for 2 weeks, and then the Army reared its head. Some of the colonels that we had that said we had to have an FTX. If you remember all of the things, I hated that term. I said, this is not a field training exercise. This is a mission, you know. And on our quote FTXs, we got people killed. We went on real targets. We went to Pontoon, and we ran targets out of Pontoon. I mean, our man we were given mission briefings just like one of their teams, and everything else. And our guys went across the border. They went across the fence. And, you know, like the Gene P used to say, if you come back alive, you graduate.
Holy cow! That's one of the most interesting things I've heard. Maybe Recondo may have done it as well, but y'all actually going to one of the FOBs or CNCs, whichever one you like to call it at that point in time frame, and actually going in for a real operation. That we've spoken to a few guys that were in the classes to where they actually lost guys. So yeah. It is the real deal.
Yeah, I mean it again. You know, like I said, there was no academic. It wasn't. You know, guys, this is here to teach you how to survive, and you and your team. That's how you do it. And teaching you how to. That's a great illustration right there. How to get your uniform together. I mean, anybody that you could pick up and shake, and they made a noise, he needed to go back to school again. I mean, you silence everything. If it rattled, it didn't go with you. Because silence and stealth was that's how we live. Is, you know, and I was talking to somebody the other day. Gene and I were doing a podcast that what we taught our guys and we tried to accomplish is you become part of the jungle. That once you get on the ground and you've been there 10, 15 minutes, if those animal sounds and normal sounds of the jungle don't come back, you're in for a bad day. And that when you're moving, when you're doing your thing, if any of those noises stop, you better stop. And you better be paying close attention to everything. I mean, you have to become part of the jungle so you don't disrupt the natural flow of what's going on. And again, you know, those were the things that we taught in the school that nobody else ever taught. Because our mission was different. I mean, 17 miles deep into Laos, and it's going to be an hour and a half before somebody gets out there to help us.
Were you guys? You had mentioned going through the gears and making everything sterile and quiet, silencing gears and everything. Your gear. Were y'all also trying to do the best you could to kind of tell guys the universal way of loading your web gear or setting up your web gear in your rucksack to where if you went down, your teammates would know exactly where everything was? Or was that type of stuff covered in the 1-0 school as well?
Yes, absolutely. We taught the basics on, you know, like you say, if I needed an extra smoke grenade, and I didn't have any more. I knew where one was, and my teammates were upset if I could get it. The same thing with if you needed an extra grenade, if you needed an extra magazine or something like that. Yeah, we taught a basic thing, and then we said, okay, guys, if you got a particular way you want to do something for yourself, okay, that's fine. We're not dictators here, but we're going to give you the basics right here. Here's what you do. This will work. If you want to modify it a little bit, that's okay. We don't have a problem with that. But and but it was very important to know where everything was in your partner's workshop.
How long was your stint at Longton as the I believe would the correct term be officer in charge of 10 school?
Yes, I was there. I probably went there. Let's see. I got hit in August. Spent the entire almost a month of September in the hospital and back at FOB4. I probably went to Longton in October of '68. My DEROS was May of '68. And so I was the OIC in the 10 school for uh, for all that period of time. So as I was getting ready, uh, we got a new camp commander in, Mark Ponzillo, and there was a special project there called the Borden Project, and John Mullins was the OIC of that. And Mullins and I got to be good friends. And so he was getting ready to rotate. So, yeah, there's John. And there's I'll think of the other, Charlie Brown. That's what we called his name. His name wasn't Charlie, but his last name was Brown, so we called him Charlie Brown. Uh, uh, where was I? And so I talked to Major Ponzillo, and I said, I'd really like to take over Borden. And he said, well, you're a real short timer. I said, what if I extend? And he says, if you extend, I'll let you have Project Borden. And I said, okay. I said, that's the deal. So I put in my extension papers. That was the easy part. Explaining it to my wife was kind of the hard part.
Yeah, because guys, he was married before he went to Vietnam. I forgot to bring that up, but he got married before going into SOG. So you can imagine how worried his new wife must have been during all of this.
Well, she wasn't really worried a great deal because she did. I never told her anything.
There you go.
And she said, I don't want to know. I don't want to have to sit here on the 6 o'clock news and they say so and so got shot up at Da Nang. I don't know. I don't want to know that. She said, if something happens, there's plenty of time. I'll know it soon enough. And so ignorance is bliss in this case.
I agree that I think that would have been the best way to do it, because I've heard stories of guys' girlfriends and wives almost having nervous breakdowns looking at the nightly news trying to figure out if it was their guys or not, and that's terrible.
And so she expected me home in May, but that didn't happen. Well, I did come home for turnaround leave where I had to say, well, I got to go back in 30 days type thing. But anyway, we got through that. Everything worked out okay. Well, I got back to camp after my turnaround leave, and I walked into the 3 shop. I looked up on the board, and in Team Borden was another guy in camp. Fast Eddie Gibbons was a Team Borden chief. I said, hey, what's the deal here? So I go right straight to the CO's office. I get over to Major Ponzillo's office, and I said, "Now look, you told me I could have boarders. Now, what's the deal?" And so he says, "Well, here's what happened. The guy that was the operations officer for the entire Long Tom camp, not only, he managed Op 34, Op 35, Op 30, we had Op 32 there, and Op 37 also in there." And so the S3, was the full chief operating officer of the whole camp. And so he said, he was supposed to extend, but he didn't. So therefore, I got to have an S3. And he said, "You're the man. You're the best captain I got, and you're going to be the S3. I was angry as hell, but at the same time, as I was there a little while, I said, if I'd been the commander, I'd made the same decision. So, I understand what it has to do. And as it turned out, by being the S3, I got my fingers in all the stuff and it wound up being a very good. And I stayed there from. I rotated out of Vietnam on December the 7th, 69.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
And
geez Louise.
another interesting thing, kind of like, the thing with the wounded guy next to me. We left Vietnam at daylight on December the 7th. And I'm in this 707, and it just so happened I'm sitting by a window on the right-hand side. And as we left out of Cameron Bay, we made a hard right turn and climbing out, going to the west. And as I looked out the window, the sun was just coming up out of the ocean. How it's just early morning rising. It's just coming up out of the sun. And a thought ran through my mind. Why? I don't know. It's December the 7th. And I looked and I said, that's the exact same sight that the Japanese pilots had when they lifted off the carrier 40-something years ago.
Wow.
And I have never forgot that. I can close my eyes and still see that scene climbing up into the sun. So,
jeez Louise.
Then it was only 23 hours home.
Only 23. But you were on the way home, so that's what all that mattered. Do you want to? Did you to kind of close out that we had a few questions? But I was going to see if did you end up staying in the military? I don't know if you ended up going back to Vietnam or not. But did you stay in for a while, or did you immediately?
I didn't. I didn't get out. I signed my what do they call it? Voluntary indefinite. I was a reserve officer, and so as you commissioned out of OCS, you're in the reserve officer. You're not a not a regular officer, not a RA. So I signed up for voluntary indefinite active duty, which means as long as they need you, they'll keep you. I went to from Vietnam. I went to Okinawa, the first group, and I spent 30-month tour in the first group. And while I was at Long Con, Okinawa was sending in what we call snakebite teams, and I trained the snakebite team.
Oh.
Well, so they came through Long Con. That's where they got their initial camp staying, going in, and then we had to put them through a week refresher. And like these guys needed a refresher, but you know how the Army is. So, I mean, we got guys like Jerry Waring and all that kind of stuff. These guys don't need no refresher. They wrote the book, guys.
Moose Monroe was in that group.
Yeah, Moose was in that book. I mean, oh gosh, I got a big picture here of me and all those guys that at Long Time that were there, the snakebite team. And
Oh,
so, but anyway, uh, so my team, I got sent to Korea to do communications training. Again, I was a good trainer. I knew how to organize training, and it just kind of made sense to me. And I knew how to manage instructors and that kind of stuff. And we had a big operation with the Koreans every year called Full Legal. It lasted like 6 weeks. The year before, and they used the old ANGRC 87 radios, and which were, I mean, the 109s were okay, and 87s were just absolutely, I mean, it drove commo guys crazy. But anyway, that's what the Koreans had. The year before on Full Legal, they made something like 17% of their scheduled communications contacts. So I just happened to be there. They knew I was a good trainer. So I got tagged with a special augmented, my team. I had a A113 out of Okinawa, out of A Company of Okinawa. Me and my youngest brother commanded the same A team 10 years apart.
wow.
He commanded a 113 later on. But anyway, I took 113 and we were augmented with 5 additional commo operators. And we went, and our mission, we'd go over and we'd spend 3 weeks, come back for 2 weeks, and then go back for 3 more weeks. And we made 4 trips over there. We trained every single radio operator in the Korean Special Forces group before we went on full legal that year.
Wow.
And and they that year, after we trained it, they made 87% of all of their radio contacts.
Wow. That's, I mean, that's an astronomical improvement.
Yeah, I mean it, and they just had never been trained before, not intensively, and so and one of the other things, while I was on Okinawa, my team 113 came up for rotation back for snakebite. So we were training and getting ready to go on snakebite, and the group commander was coordinating the next trip for the commo team to go up and do the training in Korea. And so they talked to the commander of the Korean Special Forces, or he inquired about, when are they coming and this kind of stuff and everything. He said, when Captain Mills and his team coming back? And the commander said, I'm sorry, Captain Mills won't be coming. He has another assignment. He won't be coming back this time. The commanding general of the Korean Special Forces said, if Captain Mills don't come, don't send anybody. Don't worry about it.
Wow.
So I didn't get to go to snakebite. I had to give my team to somebody else and let them take it to snakebite, and I went back to Korea again.
I mean, that's, I know you were wanting to get back with the snake bite, but I mean, that's high praise if the commanding officer in Korea is like, don't bother sending another American if Captain Mills isn't there. That's wild.
So, so I got to go to Korea 4 times, and I also led a B team during the whole operation.
Oh, wow. An entire B team. Wow. And was that one of your final duty stations or overseas tour, or?
It was my final overseas tour. We came back from Okinawa in I guess it was July of '72. So I got there in January of '70, and we came back in July '72. And at that point in time in the Army, there was no special operations branch for officers. you know, and long time service in special forces was not a good thing for an infantry officer or any officer for that though, because they hadn't designated a branch yet. So I was kind of way behind the power curve as far as career was concerned. So the Army decided I needed, you know, to be reintroduced to the real Army. So I went as a company commander to 1st Battalion, 50th Infantry, 2nd Armored Division in Fort Hood, Texas.
Wow.
And
That's a whole new switch up for you.
Oh.
Armored division.
oh, let me tell you, well, an infantry battalion and an armored division in the 2nd Armored, you know, division. And our brigade was a tank heavy brigade. We were the only infantry battalion in our brigade. It was two armored battalions and one infantry battalion. And it was like being in a different world.
I can only imagine after what you had been doing.
So it was, you know, it was the real Army. And I spent a year there, and then, you know, Vietnam was winding down, all that kind of stuff. And Congress cut the military budget by a tremendous amount. So there came the traditional rift of returning reserve officers back to regular duty, or back, you know, to civilian duty. So I was one of the 15,000 captains that got released in November of 72, I think. No, November of 73.
Jeez, that whole reduction in force thing. I get mad hearing about guys that got commissions over there, or some of the guys that got battlefield commissions being riffed down when they got out. That's a sore spot.
You know, you have to understand, and again, that was one of the things. I was pretty disappointed and probably pretty angry at the time. But over time, as I got into the business world and did things, and you know, at that point in time, me and most of these other guys that were beside me on Rift Day, we were quite a few years up. We were very, very senior captains. You could have 3 or 4 of these brand new captains that just came in for the same price it cost one of us.
Wow.
You know, because we were making some, at that point in time, there's been quite a few raises in the Army. And the difference between being a captain with, you know, 8 years service and a captain with 3 years service was a whole bunch of money.
Wow. Yeah, I can see the Army trying to save money there.
You know, I can see the value there when I was, you know, president of the company and trying to make decisions on things. If you can get 4 of something for the cost of 1 of the other, you get 4 of the others and we'll make up the difference. And they said, hey, you know, the argument was, you got the greatest combat experience bunch of guys here at the best level. You know, the captain is the one that he's still down with the troops, but he's still high enough to understand the big picture. You know, the captain is really the linchpin in all of that stuff. And, you know, he's the one responsible for training and supervising all the lieutenants to get them through. Plus, he's able to coordinate and work with the majors and the lieutenant colonels. And he understands their end of the thing because he can see the big picture also. So the captain is really a linchpin. And the argument that back, or the justification that came back out of Washington, D.C., of course, or the Pentagon was, hey, with the way the civilian situation is right now, we're not going to get in another Army for another war in at least 10 years. And I don't care how experienced these guys are, they're all going to be retired and gone by then, so it's not going to make that much difference if we have to start out brand new. So, and this is what we can do right here. So that's the way it works. And I understand that. As I said, once I got into the business world and spent several years managing businesses. Uh, it makes sense. And the Army's a business. I mean, that's what it is. You got X number of dollars, and you got to do the best you can with it. So I understand that. I'm not bitter anymore or anything like that. Yeah, sometimes disappointed. I think I would have enjoyed a career, but hey, that I had a great business career. I can't complain about that either. So
It sounds like you've lived one heck of a life militarily and your successful post-military career. It's just outstanding man and definitely an outstanding soldier and patriot. Just outstanding. We've had you now over 2 hours, which I wasn't wanting to do, but we've got two questions, one from the viewers, and then I had a question that I've always wanted to ask anybody that worked at Longton about a photo. But here
okay.
is one of the viewer questions. He was curious, did you run any missions or know the 1-0 of RT Python later on, Jim Butler? And do
Uh,
you have any stories of him and any stories of Billy Waugh?
yes, I ran three missions on Python when Hatcher was the 1-0 and I was the 1-1. And no, I didn't run with Jim Butler. He came in a couple, I think a year or so behind me. I'm not sure what years he was there.
70 or so.
Yeah. And so I was back on Okinawa then. So he and I didn't really cross paths during that period of time. Billy Waugh, I met Billy Waugh a couple of times. He were not what you would call old running buddies or anything like that. Know all the stories about him. Jim Hetrick was his 1-1 for a while, and so I got a lot of firsthand stories of some of the stunts that he pulled.
I bet that was a heck of a team, Mr. Jim and Billy together.
And that type of thing. But no, he and I were kind of like, I left Longton, and probably about a month or two later, he came down to Longton. He was there, and they were doing some training and some things back there. When I was on Okinawa, he passed through Okinawa. We had a little super secret camp down on the south end of the island for a special project, and he came through with the team on that. And we crossed paths, but we never did any real working together a great deal.
Wow. Okay. And I had, let's see, one or two photos, but I was curious about the world famous 1-0 class photos and how they got started in front of the shuttered doors right here on the side of the building. So was that just an ad hoc thing that happened after the guys would come in they graduated and just take a team photo?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That was usually after we got back from Khartoum. That we'd done our quote FTX, and we were unloading, and they would come in, and we would they'd get all of their gear and equipment, and usually within 24 hours they were on a plane going back to their FOB.
Wow, that's
these were old, and this was actually in front of the barracks building that they lived in.
Okay, so that's
they were just old stucco buildings. They were just kind of like long houses and just had double bunks on both sides. They were just big open caverns.
Excellent. I was always curious about that because any even any team photo, there's one right here, Mr. John Allen, and they're not in a team. I think he was there training. I think he was
John
around
Allen. He was actually part of our cadre for a while.
Oh, that makes sense on this then. Training TAC officer then.
Right.
Wow. Holy cow. That's amazing. Samuel Helen from CCC, he ended up becoming a Marine Corps general. So quite the interesting group y'all had down there.
Yeah.
I'm always interested in the photos and such as that. And think there was one more I was going to show you
Yeah.
here. I had some photos of Billy and Mr. Melvin Hill doing some airborne insert training and all of that. This is Mr.
Yeah.
Chuck Clayton from RP California doing his training. You can see the buildings back there, but
yeah, they trained at Long Con when they were going to do that halo jump into Laos.
Yes, sir. I was seeing to where not only would they the Americans and such either go through Halo or rehash Halo school, but y'all are also doing a little bit of training of indigent airborne training and such, so getting the Nungs airborne qualified and stuff like that. I thought that was pretty interesting as well.
Right. Well, here's another unique story. When we were in Long Con, Bearcat, the big 9th Division base camp was, I don't know, a few miles down the road from us. And the 9th Division was moving up in country somewhere, and the Thais were going to take over Bearcat. And so they were doing all this moving and everything else. And the 9th Division had a training area where they trained all of their infantry guys, and they had an old Huey that had been shot up. And they used it to teach people how to get in and get out and all that kind of stuff, and going in on an insert and that type of thing. So me and Jim Hetrick and I think Charlie Miller was probably involved in this, and a Major Jim Island. Major Island had been over there at the camp, and he came back and he said, "You got a deuce and a half here?" And I said, "Yeah." You got somebody that can drive it? I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, go get that truck and get 4 people and come on, let's go." And, he said, "Put on your just nondescript uniforms." Okay. So we go over there. And so, man, he's got a clipboard and all that kind of stuff. And he walks up and he points, and we also had a heavy duty, what's called a rough terrain forklift. So we had that forklift. We took that forklift over to Bearcat. So we go over there and we just flat put the forks underneath that Huey helicopter, set it up on top of the back of that truck, tied her down good, and we got up to the front gate. And Major Island, he had on his regular uniform with his major star and all that kind of stuff on, and he, showed them the paperwork, said, "Here we go, we're here to pick this up, we're going to deliver it, wherever the 9th Division's going." "Okay, sir, thank you very much." Yes. And so we mounted that thing up on top of a platform, and that's where we did rappelling training.
Oh man, that is too cool.
And we also taught them this is how you rig the floor when you rig, for rappelling or anything like that, or pulling out McGuire rigs when you're pulling out on strings. Here's how you rig everything. We taught them how to rig all that. There was a helicopter repair thing right up at the Long Con airfield, and so one of the other things we did, the C-130s we used, the Blackbirds, once every few months, they had to go back to the Philippines to get repair work done. That was the only place they could get their electronics worked on. So we flew those Blackbirds all the time. Well, one time we were coming back from Pontoon, and it was real late in the afternoon and that kind of stuff and everything. And so I called the camp when we picked up and when we crossed over Tonsanut. And I told them, "Hey, look, we're about 15, 20 minutes out. Tell the mess sergeant over there, tell the cooks to get us some sandwiches and Coca-Colas and all that kind of stuff, because we're all hungry. We hadn't had anything to eat all day." So anyway, the aircraft crew chief was standing there when I was talking to him. And he said, "Man, what kind of sandwiches?" So I said, "Roast beef sandwiches. Our cook makes great roast beef sandwiches." He said, "Man, that sounds really good." I said, "You guys don't have them?" He says, "No, we leave every morning, at 4:30 in the morning. The mess hall's not open, and they don't fix us nothing, and we don't get a stop all day, and we don't get nothing till we get back home at night." And I said, "They don't take care of you like that?" And they said, "No." I said, "How many in your crew?" And I think there's 6 in that crew. And I called the camp and I said, look, I want 6 sandwiches and I want 6 Coca-Cola, and have them here when the aircraft lands. And so I gave them to them, and man, those guys thought, oh man, this is great. I said, you guys do this every day? He says, no, we don't, but somebody does every day. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, you tell any crew that's on this run, when they pull out of Saigon, they call here and there will be sandwiches and Cokes. Just tell them how many and what time you're going to be here. So, and we did that for the rest of the time I was there. That air crew got sandwiches and Cokes when they made the turn at Longton. We were there further south. They went back north after they left us. And so anyway, so pretty soon, one of them was going back to Philippines to get worked on. And he says, hey guys, you guys really been good to us. He said, we're going back to the Philippines, and this Blackbird, they can't nobody inspect it. Once we lock the doors, that's it. And he said, we can bring you back all the San Miguel beer you want. He said, you just give us the money. We'll call you before we go. You give us the money, we'll pay. So we give them enough money for 2. I talked to our mess sergeant. He said, man, that's a hell of a deal, because ain't nobody in this country got San Miguel beer, real beer. Because back then, all you got was 3-2 beer. And so anyway, we used to get 2, every time one go back, we get 2 pallets of San Miguel beer. That's where our trading material came, man. Every general's dog robber was in there wanting San Miguel beers for his general's party. Well, their favors come with that, my friends.
Y'all had it made in that fashion.
That was our trading material, let me tell you.
That is the Special Forces. Gotta love you guys.
Well, that's why they call it special, right? You do what they teach you to survive in your environment. That's what you do.
And as we're closing out, because heck, I'm gonna have you here for 2.5 hours if I don't shut my mouth. But I wanted to show you, Mr. Leon Sonnenberg sent me some photos from his stint as an instructor at Longton, and some of the mock-ups and some of the main rooms. And there's Mr. Leon with some Chi-Com gear, and I believe that's the front entrance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, that was the first time I'd ever seen it. Didn't know anything about it, and man, that definitely looks like a super secret base and important stuff going on there. And that's Joe Walker, Mel Hill, Andre Parker, and Al Drapeau from Project Delta at Longton. All studs. But is there, as we close out today, is there anything you'd like to say as we shut down?
No, just thank you for having me, and I appreciate this, telling old war stories and remembering old friends and that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, a lot of them are not with us anymore. We're all getting old, and we all, I count myself one of the most blessed people on this planet to survive the things that happened. And I think about it, and as I said, I think about that young man that was next to me there in the hospital, and I wish him well. And I try to every day, do something good for somebody, and try to be a better person today than I was yesterday.
Absolutely, couldn't have said it any better myself. You were definitely a good man. I knew the moment we first spoke 2 years ago that you were a good guy, good man, and was just glad I was able to be put in touch with you, and glad you felt safe enough and confident enough to come share with us, because we sure as heck enjoyed getting to hear from you today. It's been a long time request to have somebody that knew about 1-0 school and the SAPPER attack, and you combined both of them for an outstanding show, and we just can't thank you enough for coming and spending 2.5 hours with us this morning.
Well, thank you very much. I had a great compliment paid me last year on Veterans Day. The little hometown that I grew up in, up here in North Texas. On their Veterans Day, they had a gentleman. He was a full colonel. I can't remember his full name right now, but he was in the development group for special operations and all that kind of stuff. And unbeknownst to me, he called me out specifically and said that the work and the stuff, uh, I won't say manual, but the stuff that we taught in 1-0 school, they still use today.
Wow. That's got to be a huge boost of confidence to know how ahead of the game y'all were. That stuff that y'all wrote and institutionalized is still being used today like that. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, and especially for the special ops programs where you're working with indigenous forces and things like that, which is what our forte was, is doing that. So he said we still use that stuff today because it gets right to the heart of what you're doing. It's not tremendously complicated because the people you're trying to teach are not Rhodes scholars, but they can understand this stuff. And you tell them and you practice and practice and practice, and when you got it perfect, you practice some more.
Wow, that's yeah, repetition makes you perfect, practice makes perfect, and you guys are the guys to definitely get an indigenous force trained and get them out and being the best troops they can be. I mean, that's what the Green Berets are all about, the Special Forces men, and we are just honored to have any of you guys from the CNCs come and join us, and especially you with your knowledge of several huge incidents in SOG history. So we just can't thank you enough. And we've had a whole bunch of thanks coming in and saying they'd love to have you back to hear from you again. So if you'd ever like to come on, you've got an open invitation to come join us again, sir.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to everyone that said thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I will go ahead and shut it down. And thank you again. And I will be in touch and I'll get you a copy of this sent to you to where you can have it for posterity's sake.
Okay. God bless America.
Absolutely, sir. No better way to end it. God bless you and God bless America.